What's up, everybody, and welcome to the State of Wild, episode 29, a regular podcast, YouTube video, web series thing. My name's Meowth. As usual, I'm joined by CorbettGames, and today we are honored by the one, the only, Dane. Dane, how are you doing tonight, dude?
You're right, not bad. Bit of a weird sleep schedule for me. 2 a.m. it is here.
Lucky for us, you're on a weird sleep schedule. So
I am. I'm wide awake.
But yeah, it's a very weird podcast schedule because I think Corbett's over in Australia, I'm over in the US, and you're over in England. We just happen to all be awake at the same time to record this podcast, which is awesome. So yeah, we have a lot to talk about. A lot's happened in this week. But before we get started, just a reminder to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoy our content. It does actually support us a lot. But yeah, let's go ahead and start off with the big news. A brand new mini set came out, Dark Moon Races, 35 brand new cards that's purchasable all at once. Monetization aside, let's kind of just talk the big impact on WoW. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room, the Tiller OTK decks, right? Warlock and Priest. And there has been a lot of controversy about this deck on Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, all that kind of good stuff. So if you guys haven't heard about this deck yet, so basically all you do is Wretched Tiller is the 1-mana 1/1. Whenever it attacks, deal 2 damage to your opponent. You make it immune with Death Speaker, and then you play a brand new card, Hysteria, so that it attacks basically infinite times since it's immune. And it OTKs your opponent, basically 60 to 120 damage. So kind of just open the floor. What are your all's thoughts, opinions about this deck? Because I know it's generated quite the buzz in the 36 hours that this mini set's been out. Dane, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Well, just from personal experience, I was on stream. I think I streamed for like 13, 14 hours yesterday, and it only killed me 2 or 3 times the entirety of it. And I played against it a good chunk. So it's either the players aren't used to the deck yet, which is making it seem like it has a bad win rate, or it's just not as powerful as people think it is. I mean, it's a free card setup, but there is quite a lot of mana, and you do have a bit of time to actually kill it, like any other combo deck. So right at the minute, I don't think it's that much of a problem.
Yeah, I would definitely co-sign a lot of that. I think that the play experience that it creates, right, and the whole like timer and like roping out the opponent's turn, I think that stuff all sucks. Like that should be fixed, obviously. But the deck itself, in terms of like just judging the power level, I think like the full combo builds that we've seen are actually pretty bad. Like straight up, like it's not even like, are they S tier or are they tier 1? I just think they're not very good. I think that they just die a lot to a lot of the aggressive stuff in the format. And like Dane said, they kind of give you a lot of time, and they're pretty open to disruption sometimes. So I think the package can maybe be like really good in like a Reno lock, something that's a little slower but wants like a finisher. But I mean, this ain't Snip Snap Warlock. This ain't the same thing as what we've seen before.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people echoing this idea of brand new tier 1 OTK combo deck. Right, it's worse than Demon Hunter. It's worse than Snip Snap, or like no. I think a lot of people don't remember how broken those decks actually were. And like you said, if we're talking about meta decks, okay, I get that an OTK deck might counter a lot of people's like really janky control, greedy decks and stuff like that. But that's kind of like what combos are supposed to be, right? But if we talk meta decks, right, I think the only deck that it probably consistently beats is what? Big Priest, Reno Lock, and that's kind of it, right? Because Reno Priest has a Lucia to disrupt combo, and the deck just kind of folds to anything moderately aggressive. So like Odd Paladin, Secret Mage, Kingsbane, Odd Rogue, Pirate Warrior, all the aggressive decks that we have in the format feel like very, very easy counters to the deck. And so I think I don't want to say it's not meta, or like not going to be meta, and it's not annoying. Like, I'm not saying that it's not annoying to play against, but I don't think it's a top-tier deck by any stretch of the imagination.
No. It seems to have problems with secrets as well. Any form of secrets. Even rogue ones, like evasion. Even if you want to play a fun deck, just run an evasion. And if you think they're going to do the combo, you can keep them off your face to the point where they can't even pop evasion or ice block as well. And a trick, if people don't know, if you think you're going to get roped out by the timer and you do have an ice block up, just leave the client and re-enter, and your turn will be... I've actually skipped my opponent's turn because they're still watching the animations. And I take my turn and they rope out,
Oh, wow.
Countered by their own deck.
Yeah.
But yeah, the basic outcry, I think it's sort of a natural thing for a lot of these like combo decks that come out, is that whenever like there's a new big OTK deck, I think the reaction is always a little extreme. And just because it's so uninteractive, I get why people are pissed, and you know, I hope they do like patch up the animation stuff, but you know,
yeah,
it's a little bit much. It's a bit much.
It's a combo deck. People don't really like getting comboed, and
Yeah,
like
exactly.
there's loads of combo. Like, you could argue Pillager Rogue. It's exactly the same as that. It's all got like, it's got 2 copies of every card. You can do it on turn 6 theoretically, and it's really good against Big Priest and Reno Priest, and it's uninteractable, and you can't really counter it.
It's not like good. So
no, it's not good. No,
Yeah.
and it's actually got more survivability than against like an aggro deck. 'Cause you can conceal yourself or you can evasion yourself. So I don't know. I think at the minute it might become a problem in the future when they release more cards, but I don't think it's that good at the minute.
Yeah, I compare it a lot to Mechathune Warlock, right? It's just a slightly faster Mechathune Warlock. And back in the day, Mechathune Warlock wasn't a top tier deck because it struggled with the same things that we're talking about now, right? With this deck. And like, if you want to compare it to like a modern deck, I think like Quest Mage is maybe the closest example, is a combo deck that beats up on these slow, dirtily control decks, but that's like what the deck is supposed to do.
Yeah. But in terms of like other stuff, I mean, we can go from like the Tiller and talk about like what else has been happening in the set, like what the standout cards, and you know, what are the things we might have overrated, those kind of things. So I mean, I think Nitro Boost in Rogue and Warrior, that's like been something that's been very powerful so far. There's so much Kingsman at High Legend. It's like, it's actually crazy. About like half my games in the first day or so were up against like things using Nitro Boost, aka Baby Oil, which is a amazing nickname, I think.
no, yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna say, even at Low Legend, because I just play like stupid decks, it's all Kingsbane. The majority
really?
of
It's still like the entire...
Yeah, all Kingsbane. It's a mixture of Kingsbane, people try and Tiller out, and Secret Mage. That was it. Very little priests. No one really wants to play priests on the first day.
I mean, I think Nitro Boost, I am very surprised that this card is 1 mana, and I think it would still probably be playable at 2. It's a little bit harder to corrupt it 2, but the fact that, I mean, Tinker's Sharp Sword Oil is like a pretty damn good card in Kingsbane, and then they print a 1 mana copy of this card. It's kind of bonkers. I got hit with a 10 attack Kingsbane on turn 4 yesterday when I was streaming, and I was just like, yep, this is okay. People are complaining about Tiller Warlock. I feel like this is maybe the card that you should be a little bit pissed about. But I mean, outside of just Kingsman, I think it's like really good in Odd Rogue. I was playing it as like basically a Cold Blood in Odd Rogue with Horse Riders and all that kind of good stuff. I think it was very good, and it's a little bit less good in Pirate Warrior. It's a little bit more awkward in that deck, but it's still bonkers strong in Pirate Warrior. So I think Nitro Boost is maybe up there for probably the strongest card from the mini set by far. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's really good. I think there are a couple others that might be better. I think like Hysteria as this thorough removal tool is sort of insane. And I think the Armor Vendor, that 1/3, that neutral gain armor, that card's busted. Like, that card's so good, I think.
Yeah, I slept on Armor Vendor a little bit.
It's like I forget what the Warrior card is though.
Rover, the
Rover.
Etonium Rover.
Yeah, I mean, on average, how much are you getting off Rover? 4, 2.
Yeah,
it's very, it's very, it's unless you're playing Skipper, you get 6 off of them, but it's a guaranteed one drop that gives 4 armor with a decent stat line for trading into small stuff. So it does give these type of Warlock decks a bit more survivability, I guess, for Tiller combos.
Yeah, I would also say it's just like in Odd Warrior with Bran is insane. I had a turn where I was at like 15 HP, and then I played Bran double Vendor, and then all of a sudden I was at like 40. And I was like, okay, yeah.
Nice Reno Jackson. Yeah, pretty good.
And I think maybe an underrated aspect of that card is like Darkly Warlock is a deck that we haven't really talked about tonight because Tiller Warlock has been dominating the headlines, but the fact that it gives the opponent armor, and so it's harder for them to discount their Flesh Giants and their Molens, I think is this maybe an underrated aspect of the card. And it, like, Mistress to Mixtures is another comparison. This doesn't have a death rattle, so like those Renalocks or decks that play N'Zoth that want Mistress to Mixtures, right? Q block Renalock. you can play this without having to worry about diluting your N'Zoth pool. So I think there's a bunch of like underrated little synergies with this card that I think it's really good as well. I still rate Nitro Boost a little bit higher just because of the immediate impact that it's having, but maybe long term, we'll be talking about Armor Bender from this set.
It's a great tester for Explosive Rune as well, if you wanted just to throw that into it.
Yeah.
You don't even take damage off the...
I think you actually gain 1, right?
Yeah, yeah, you gain 1. Yeah.
A couple of other cards I want to talk about. So Backfire, I think, is in that same boat as Hysteria in the Tiller Warlocks and the Darkler Warlocks. It's just like 3 mana, draw 3. It's pretty strong. I think we need that. But Conjure Mana Biscuit, let's talk about this. With Cyclone and Sorcerer's Apprentice in these shells, you guys want to talk about this? Because I know you both have been playing a lot of decks that involve this card.
So I have been using the card recently in Quest Mage. I thought that like it'd be good in Quest Mage, but I think actually playing it myself, it's sort of insane. Like once you kind of like get the chance to do it yourself, it's like, oh my god. I had a game earlier. I had a quest completed on turn 3. As the Quest Mage, and that was a little bit disgusting. So I think like I just didn't think about like how much mana you get back because of the Apprentice as well, because you get that first like mana discounted. So it becomes like a game 1 if you play it that turn and stuff. And so I don't know, it's been really, really filthy, and just makes these insane swing turns early. So yeah, that card's really impressed me, and I've been using it.
It's because the I guess the biscuit gives a charge
it completes. Yeah, it gives the quest as well. Yeah,
and then you've got like Magic Trick can find it and stuff like that. Because I was trying, what was it, Mozaki? Mage.
Mozaki, yeah.
Which is pretty much to say like you can play Mozaki on 5, you can pre-biscuit and then biscuit and then get your apprentices out and then go from there. And you just run a bunch of cards that reduce mana. I forget what it is now. I'm really bad at card names. It's the card that it's 2 mana and it makes all your spells in the deck 1 less.
Oh, Incantus Flow?
Yeah.
yeah.
So you kind of play that. You get to turn 5 or 6 and you can pretty pretty easily OTK people with spell power stuff. Like just not Icelands. Frostbolts and missiles basically is all I use for that. So that's been that card's going to be the most kind of tilting, I think. Because it's just going to come out of nowhere. Like you don't expect your opponent to be able to do this, and then suddenly it's just a complete refresh. They play coins, and it's over.
It gives me Raised Dead vibes from Darkler Warlock. It's like gaining mana on those turns that you're playing Sorc Apprentice or Darkler and doing all the degenerate spells, and then it gaining you mana is kind of insane, right? Like it's a mana bank basically. I think I'm happy that it's refresh mana and not gain mana like Innervate, because I think that would be even more bonkers. But yeah,
was that one of the ideas they had for Innervate nerf? Do you know when they were nerfing?
I think so. Yeah, I think that was floated out there.
I think like they don't like recreating the card. They just like to reduce the mana on it because that's an idea for like a future card they could potentially print essentially. Because I remember reading like they wanted to do like it costs 2 mana and refresh 4 or something like that, because they released a blog ages ago where they had ideas of what they wanted to do with the card. But yeah, it's kind of like reminiscent of that, because obviously if you have like 1 apprentice on there, it's spend 1 mana, get 2 back essentially. Yeah,
it's a coin. Yeah, like you said, it just lets you kind of do things the opponent just doesn't expect. All of a sudden, like you're just doing things that you shouldn't be able to do with that much mana, and so yeah, it's kind of insane. I don't think it like makes Quest Mage that strong overall, but it's definitely like a step forward for the deck after it's been struggling a little bit over the past expansion or 2.
I mean, we talked about this a little bit, right? Where it doesn't actually take that much to make these decks that seem really bad or kind of way out of the metagame to become really, really strong, right? And Darkmoon Faire, Big Priest, a deck that was kind of just, it was horrible, got 2 really good cards, and all of a sudden it's a top tier deck. Quest Mage, it got 1, I think, really strong card with Conjure Mana Biscuit, but maybe it needs a little bit more help, especially against aggressive decks. But I think Conjure Mana Biscuit is a very, very strong card. It's going to be a very annoying card moving forward.
So Dane, the Conjure Mana Biscuit with the Mozaki, has that been the main deck that you've been playing so far since the expansion release, or has there been other things that you've been using a lot of?
Kind of like Secret. I tried Secret Rogue out because there's a bug at the minute. They're going to patch it at some point, I guess. If you play the minion that summons a quest. No, sorry, summons a secret from your hand, and it draws a card. That actually triggers counterspell. It doesn't actually counterspell anything. So I've been playing a bit of that. I played Shudderwock with the new armor vendor. So you basically force your opponent and yourself to gain armor. And but mainly Mozaki at the minute. I haven't tried Tiller out because I'm one of those people, like, if someone's playing the deck, I feel like I don't have to play it to experience it. If I see my opponent play it, I kind of know what's going on, sort of thing. So I'll tend to just play, stuff that people might have overlooked on day one. But the most success I had was with the Mozaki deck and the Biscuit. Biscuit's really, it's going to be annoying. Like if Quest Mage comes back, I can see that. Like you say, you did it on turn 3. You could probably average out maybe turn 4, turn 5 if you were lucky enough to get the cards on time.
Yeah.
How was the Secret Rogues treating you? Like, I was really excited about the Sparkjoy cheat. Not as excited about Shenanigans, but like, did the secret package feel like good enough for you for Wild?
No, still not. No, it's like I still have problems with draw, and I'm running a massive draw engine with those cards and like Swindle. And dirty tricks and stuff like that, but it still feels like there's something not quite there. But I am playing it with the lifesteal weapon, spectral cutlass, so that's probably an issue because it's way too slow. 4 mana to get that online and then start building up. I was using the Nitro booster, but I found that in that deck I don't have enough minions to target, so if I wanted to upgrade my weapon, sometimes I had to like target my opponent's minions.
The opponent.
So it's a big issue in that deck. So I had to end up taking it out, and I just used oil because it's just more reliable that way.
I'm looking forward to messing around with. I have a deck that I have Theorycraft that I haven't played yet, but kind of merging the secret draw engine with dirty tricks and the Sparkjoy cheat with the shuffle package.
Yeah,
with Ticketmaster and stuff. Yeah,
I think that's probably the best one, isn't it? Because you got like the Death Rattle shuffle package and the Forlorn Striders, I think they're called.
Yeah.
So, I mean, anybody that's listening to the podcast knows that Shuffle Rogue has been one of my babies. And so, if secrets give me more draw, I'm all for that. And so I'll be messing around with it a little bit, but it's kind of a little bit sad that I think Rogue is missing a super strong defensive secret, because I feel like Cheat Death is really strong at what it does. Dirty Tricks is really strong at what it does, but it's missing like a good defensive option, like a Flame Ward-esque card. Because I don't think Evasion is that, and I don't think Sudden Betrayal is that. And so if they get like a good, solid defensive secret, I feel like that secret package might actually take off. Because Dirty Tricks and Cheat Death are both like really, really strong. So.
Oh, one good one as well. If you're playing against Kingsbane and you're running Shenanigans, let them bang the weapon in and try time. If you time your Shenanigans and they don't redraw the weapon, it's very likely if you play it. I think I've bananaed about 3 or 4 Kingsbanes. And you can also do it on turn 1 if you got it and you got coin out Shenanigans. They're very likely to play Cavern Finder on turn 2, and then they pull the Kingsbane and you banana.
Yeah,
I had a bit of fun with that. It's not a good card, but it's at least for that one reason it's quite fun, because this Kingsbane's quite popular at the minute.
Were there any other cards that you guys wanted to talk about? I know I've been messing a little bit with the spell Token Druid with the new spell Arbor Up, which I've been finding to have been pretty damn strong. I think Arbor Up is an insane card. But anything else for y'all that you guys wanted to touch on?
There's nothing else that sort of stands out too much. I've mostly just been testing so far like the more competitive decks, which I kind of use the cards like Nitro Boost and Hysteria, and I guess like even like Mana Biscuit today. So I haven't really stepped out too much in terms of other things. I did have a crack at like Inner Fire Priest, but when I was playing that, Rally didn't quite seem as good as I hoped, which was a bit of a bummer. But Illidari Studies, we've got it listed. The Illidari Studies in Odd Rogue actually looks a lot better than I thought. I thought it wasn't going to be very good, but yeah, in ODDH. Just the fact that it puts the card in the outcast position, like I don't think I really thought about how good that was for a lot of these cards that you get.
Yeah, my chat and I did a little bit of math. So there's basically 11 outcast cards in Demon Hunter, so the pool is super small, and I think 7 or 8 of them you're like happy to get playing Odd Demon Hunter. And so
the odds that you whiff are like so low.
Well, like the worst case scenarios, we kind of mapped it out. Were like Stellina, Glide, and Philosophy is like the 3 worst options. But even then, like Glide is not terrible because it's 3 mana, draw 4 in your aggro Demon Hunter list, right? So it's not terrible. It's not great, but so yeah, I think Illidari Studies. It kind of sucks that Demon Hunter's not more powerful, because if it was, I think Illidari Studies would be getting a lot more attention than some of these other cards. But because it's pretty damn good.
Yeah, Libra of Judgment could be a decent card for Libra Paladin, I think, as well. It's not like something you'd immediately go to, because not many people are playing kind of that style of deck in Wild at the minute. But I've had a good like chunk of like wins with Libra Paladin. I think it struggles early game if you don't draw the draw engine and you don't get the Libra cards, because currently only 4 reductions that you can get. But like to have like a 3 mana like lifesteal weapon in some cases, Corrupted is really good. It's a late game card, obviously, because you got to draw it, corrupt it, and then reduce it. But it's still like a really powerful tool potentially for that deck, like going further down the line.
Meowth and I are both big fans of the Libram deck. We've both played a ton of it, like separately as well. So I really like that card as well. I played a bit of it today, and that weapon is so good. Like if you just manage to get that 5 attack, the 5 mana discounter, like if you just get it down to like 5 mana at the minimum, it's already like really good at that point. And if you get it any cheaper, it's like pretty insane. So I slotted it in. I had a lot of fun with Librams when I tried it today.
Yeah, I was just playing it on my stream today. Like, even if you don't corrupt it, right? Just playing a 4 mana 5/3 weapon or a 5 mana 5/3 weapon is absolutely insane. And I was using it to race Tiller decks, because you don't want to put too much HP on the board. Yeah, you don't want to put too much HP on the board, and I was just hitting him with a 5 attack weapon over and over and over again, which is pretty hilarious.
It's got good opportunities for corruption as well, because you run like a couple of 7 drops. You got the 9 drop heals as well with the Justice. But
I'm looking forward to Libra Paladin being like hopefully a pretty big player. It's a really fun deck to play. So.
I think it's like way underrated by the Wild player base. Like I never see it except when you're streaming at Meowth, really. Like that's the most often time I really queue into it or see it. And I feel like it's a lot better than people think. Like Librams aren't that bad in Wild. They're pretty good actually, I think.
So let's move on from cards to let's just talk about quickly some of the new decks or the buff decks that have stood out to us outside of the Tiller OTK decks. So obviously Quest Mage with the Mana Biscuit looks really, really good. Mozaki Mage looks a lot better. I think just Big Priest with Hysteria has been really impressive when I've been playing against it, just because the Hysteria kind of addresses one of the weaknesses of Big Priest, which was Darkglare Warlock, right? If you guys don't know, Hysteria is absolutely insane against Darkglare Warlock boards, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, single-handedly beats up on the Darkglare pop-off turns, which kind of addressing one of Big Priest's weaknesses is a big buff to that deck, which is kind of scary, but also exciting at the same time, I guess, depending on whether you enjoy playing it or not. And then the Rogue decks, I think, I talked about this yesterday on Twitter, but I think Rogue might come out of this as like the biggest winner and one of like the best classes in Wild after this mini set, because both Kingsbane, Odd, and a bunch of these kind of off-meta decks have gotten so much better, and I think Kingsbane's up there for maybe one of the best 3 decks in the format right now. It's going to be a good time to be a Rogue main in Wild, I think.
From current experience, it's just been Kingsbane, and there's no real like. I haven't actually played against the Quest Mage yet. I don't think people have tried to or realized how good Conjurer's Biscuit is.
Yeah, I think it's the fact that it is a mini set, we don't expect there to be like a ton of change, right? Like it's only 35 cards, so we've kind of seen and talked about what we have seen so far, but we don't expect there to be like an entire shakeup.
Yeah, I suppose because Kingsbane is prevalent now, it's going to be hard for a Quest Mage to get online. I mean, they do have freezes and stuff, but it's the weapon, and they don't really have a way to freeze the face out. But yeah, other than that, I've not really experienced anything too kind of like meta shaping, other than the Kingsbane.
Gotcha. All right, so let's move on to our next little segment here. So Ixar has been doing these weekly Q&As on Twitter, and this week he addressed some questions and comments about Wild, much to the chagrin of a lot of people in the community. A lot of people did not like some of the answers that he had. So just to recap for those of you guys that didn't see this Q&A on Twitter or listening on podcasts. So basically, I'll be quoting Ixar here. Wild isn't somewhere that we're trying to create as curated of an experience as Standard. It should be a place where you mostly can go play that deck from the past you know and love. There are situations where a deck makes an unfun experience for most of the population where we step in and make a change, but our bar for what that means is a little bit higher than Standard, specifically because of the identity that he just described. I think the action over the last year or two should be representative of where our mind is at. I don't think Wild should be a place where we make change for the sake of change. We try to respect the players that love their old deck and want to keep playing it. To us, Wild was never supposed to be a game mode that gets balance updates just for the sake of changing things up. It's a historic mode where you can play your old decks from days of yesteryear. We still want it to be a fun format, and we have addressed extreme outliers, but it's not somewhere we balance as often as a design choice and not a lack of care or regard for the format. So this is a lot that he's saying. And then he was also asked about nerfs for the format. And he says that we've nerfed a great deal of decks in Wild. We just don't have the desire to change things for the sake of changing things up. Nothing's going to be black and white. We still look at things like play rates, win rates, deck sentiment, etc. The bar for what's considered something that we should change, though, is lower in Wild, because the thought is that a Wild player is less likely to want their things to change. So this was not well received. I'm just going to be blunt by the majority of people in the community. People did not like these answers. What are y'all's thoughts and opinions?
So I'll start with like when the Wild format started. I think one of the earliest nerfs to it was Patches and Razar, right? And they nerfed that when it was still in Standard. I think they had like a month. It was still in Standard. They moved it over to Wild. So he's talking about outliers there, and what he means by outliers, I assume is like decks that were created only in Wild and have like a very powerful spike, like Sea Witch, Snaplock, even like not Tiller, but I wouldn't say Tiller, but like what was
Aviana Druid. I like AK-47 Starline.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, the Aviana one, I'm a bit on the fence about with that one, but they've basically reduced the power level of a deck that already existed, which is basically what he's saying that they don't want to do. They don't want to, just go in and change for the sake of changing. They do want to go in and change like really unfun combos like Sea Witch and stuff like that. So there's a bit of a contradiction in what he's actually said in his statement there. And when he said Wild should be a place where you can go play your old decks, that's not really the case. I mean, first thing I'd like to ask him really is, how old are these decks? What's his range of age for these old decks that he thinks people are going to... Because he wants to respect the players going into Wild to play these old decks. Like, is he talking about... I don't know, like, is he talking about something as old as, like, Mech Mage? Or is he talking like a Tempo Mage with, like, Flame Waker? Because those decks don't exist anymore. You can't play those decks anymore. The decks that are in Wild now would never... You wouldn't recognize them, basically. You wouldn't recognize a Tempo Mage to draw 3 cards on turn 1 and play a 1/2 or whatever. The concept of the deck still exists. Like, that's a Tempo Mage. Like, you could look at a Handlock deck now, you could consider, like, that's a Reno Lock deck. I mean, they're so warped from what they once were. Like, you can't really make that argument that people are going in wanting to play these, like, old-style decks, essentially. So I kind of disagree on his logic towards, like, balance of Wild. And I think they contradict themselves quite a lot by nerfing some cards that... Like, they take the power level off some cards. Like, they've done it in the past with Razar, Patches, Aviana. Can you think of another example where they like reduced the power?
Even, right?
Darkler, yeah. So like they've reduced the power of it, and these decks still exist, So what he's saying doesn't make sense. Like Druid, a combo Druid still exists with Malagos, but it's less prevalent than it was, which is a good thing. Which means that more decks are able to come in and like fight for like the top C, like tier 1, tier 0, whatever. Currently there's like 4 decks that you can just get away with playing at the minute. I just think it would be nice if they did reduce the power level of some cards, not decks, just cards. Like even like a change to Psychic Scream, like 9 mana. I think that would seriously affect the way like Reno Priest is played, because they have no comeback mechanic then, or their reliable comeback mechanic is it's harder to play or whatever. Just little changes like that. They don't destroy a deck, but they make it so more decks come in. Like, I don't want Wild to be competitive. I don't want Wild to be standard 2.0. I just want it to be fun with a more diverse range of fun. That's all I wanted from Wild. And I think, I don't want to say it's easy to do, but it's low effort to do. I think they could do it. I think they could do it, but if they want to go that route, I'll still play Wild. But I just wouldn't give my hopes up anymore that they'd change something.
Yeah, there's so much to dig into there in what you said. I think like a great point that you brought up was how just because like cards change doesn't mean decks disappear, right? Like that's the fundamental thing. It's like just because Edwin got changed in Standard doesn't mean that Miracle Rogue is gone. Like people are still playing Edwin and they're still playing Miracle Rogue and it's still good. It's just like toning it down to be more in line with other things. And you know, like that's the fundamental thing. And as you said, like decks aren't recognizable as to what they used to look like. The whole idea of like, I want to play my old Secret Mage, it's like your old Secret Mage might have run like 14 of the same cards. Like the play pattern is completely different. There's no nostalgia really. If that's like the goal of the format is so people can go play a nostalgic deck that they played in 2018. It's like, that's just not how things work at all. It is, you know, like you've brought up the Raza and the patches change and how those were preemptive moves. When the cards were like still in Standard, and how, you know, there is this sort of line where like they're just so hesitant to kind of make those changes now, even though like we don't want Standard 2.0. I agree with that. We don't want there to be like 15 nerfs or something each expansion, which is what he mentioned, XR talked about. But there's kind of a middle ground, right? Like it's not when you count, you don't go from like 0 to 1 to 2 to 15. There's a big range there where we can actually find like a middle ground. Maybe a couple more nerfs for each expansion to give a little bit more breathing room would be something that a lot of people would welcome. And it is interesting, Dane, especially coming from like your perspective and like your channel, your community, where you are very, like I would say, creative and you're looking to play fun stuff and it's not like a heavy competitive focus. And sometimes I worry in my community, am I getting like in an echo chamber? Because it is there more of a competitive focus? Like, am I just hearing that people want like changes just for the sake of change? But it is interesting that it seems like that's a common sentiment across the community. It's not just competitive. It's not just like people who are looking to have fun. People in general seem to really want changes and for there to be more active balancing sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. It's like I did think about this quite a lot because like I was quite, because when Wild formats first started, I was quite annoyed by that they would let something like you know, Sea Witch come into like the fray of things. A deck that never existed before was just suddenly created, and they did it essentially by just changing the keyword. But as time's gone on, like I've just accepted that, you know, Blizzard are quite slow at balancing things. I don't really expect them to go in and do a whole lot, but it does get to a point where it does wear on you. Like because Wild players that are committed to playing Wild, they don't want Standard. If they wanted Standard, they would go play Standard. So I agree with them there. They don't want Standard 2.0, but we play Wild for. I don't want to speak for everyone, but personally, I play Wild because I have access to everything and it's fun to fully experiment with stuff. But when you can't experiment with stuff fully because there's like 3 decks locked in, I would like them to come in and just slightly reduce the power level or something. I'm not asking for a full deck change. I'm not asking for a destruction of deck like they did with Patron Warrior. I don't want that. Just change the power level a bit, like they did with Barnes. Like Barnes was another example. Again, with it wasn't like, it's a legendary. It's hard to draw. You don't always play it on turn 4, but obviously when you do, it's a big problem or whatever. They changed the 5, and you can still play Barnes if you want to. Power level's reduced, something like that, because then that gives more breathing room. Big Priest still exists, but you can have other decks come in that have one more turn to do whatever they need to do. Example of Secret Mage, you know, you could take some of the weaknesses down. It's been mentioned before with like Flak Mage. You could make Flak Mage just deal 1 damage to the board, or you could make it so Lackey costs 2 mana, or Lackey makes a spell cost 1 mana instead. I know that would change the flavor of things, but you could do something like that. And then other decks then come in. You know, you have other tempo decks come in, you have other aggro decks come in. But I'm not asking for like massive changes. I don't think anyone wants massive changes. Otherwise, they'd play standard. And yeah, it's just like I say, I don't. They can do what they want with the game. I'm still happy to play it. Obviously, I really like playing Wild, but it would just be like a nice little quality of life thing where instead of waiting for a new expansion every 3 months, like I suppose that's the issue with standard as well, because they're quite slow to nerf things there, that they could just maybe change a couple of like little cards up. His statement is untrue, I think. I'd like to see what the percentage of players are that are coming back in after a long break and then attempting to play like one of these like old decks, and then how long they would play it for. You know, what was their rating of fun playing against tier 1 decks, and then would they then make the change and then just end up playing a tier 1 deck? Hence, then they're no longer protecting that player. They've just essentially just switched over to a Wild player.
Well,
because I get a lot of people saying, sorry, I was going to say, I get a lot of people coming into chat saying, oh, I haven't played Wild for ages. What would you recommend playing? And obviously, I've got to recommend, well, you can try Secret Mage. That's pretty cheap.
It's cheap and it's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I also wonder, like, those people that want to come back in and play the decks of yesteryear, right? They want to play Handlock. They want to play these Mech Mage, right? Do you think that they're going to be impacted if you touch these top tier decks? Because we talk about these decks of yesteryear don't see play because they just don't match up to the power.
They don't exist.
They don't exist because they don't.
They're not real.
Yeah. And touching decks that are problematic in the format aren't going to affect those, right? Because otherwise, then those decks would probably be a lot more meta than they are. And so, if that player wants to come back and play, aren't they going to still come back and play regardless of what the power level of the top tier decks in the format are? I think that's one question. And another question is, I don't think that we're asking for balanced power level like we are in standard. I think it's widely accepted that there's going to be top tier decks and stuff like that. I think the issue has come that there's not a balanced meta, and there's very rarely been a balanced meta in WoW for like the past year, where it's like, I'm okay with there being powerful decks and powerful strategies. I just want multiple powerful decks and powerful strategies and multiple ways to attack those decks, rather than, well, there's 2 decks in the meta game. You either play those decks or you play decks that like hard counter those and lose everything else, right? That's kind of what the metagame has kind of shaped up recently to be. And I don't know. I think touching stuff like, if you touch Secret Mage, if you touch Black Mage, what decks are you hurting of yesteryear? If you touch Darkly Warlock, so if you hit Raise Dead, a card that's been in the game for 6 months, what decks from yesteryear are you hurting, right? Like,
yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, so like I wasn't mad at all, I think, when I read the comments, because it was very much in line with what I expected, right? Like, these are old arguments, like this has happened over and over again, these same talking points. And so it wasn't like I read this at all and I was riled up, but I did get very sad, and it got me more like annoyed when I read how sad and upset a lot of other people were, because, you know, this is like this part of the community, and it sort of bums me out that other people are bummed out about it. And I guess the biggest thing was that, like, as Dane said, the argument that was made about the old decks, it's just not true. And like, I understand Blizzard's position, and ultimately I'll probably keep playing Wild regardless of the exact product that they put out, or like regardless of whether the product changes that much, because I do like Wild and I'll keep playing it. It's the format I enjoy. But the whole like idea of, you know, playing that old deck from 2000 and whatever, again, we don't even know what time frame they're really thinking about here. It's just not a real thing. It's a fantasy. So
yeah, and I think the biggest thing here at the end of all of this controversy on Wednesday night, I sat there and I was like, well, I didn't learn anything new. This is the same thing that they've been talking about for years. Yeah. Like, I expected this to be the answer, and I'm still disappointed, you know, which kind of sucks. Like,
I was gonna say, the best thing you can hope for now is, like, whenever they release a set, is that they'll release a powerful card for an archetype that's in tier 2, and then that just gets replaced, and then it just keeps on like cycling that way.
Yeah,
and then at least you got like different, like you just revert to playing different decks and different deck styles then.
So like doing the podcast and things like this, like I said, I do worry sometimes that I get stuck in the echo chamber, right? Where like people watch me and then I give out my opinions, and then sometimes like my opinions might influence their way of thinking, and so it just sort of like cycles around. What is the general sentiment, do you think, Dane, from like your viewers? Like, what do you think like the consensus is when it comes to nerfs in Wild, to balance changes in Wild? Is it a situation where you think that most people that ask you questions or watch your stream or YouTube, do you think they're in the like Wild should be Wild, hands off, don't make changes, or do you think they're generally more in line with the idea of, hey, balance changes in Wild are sort of something that might be more like better if it happened more often?
I mean, like, I think it's mainly like people just have their own opinions from what they've played against. Like most people I talk to are like, they just dislike whatever's tier 1. So if it's Secret Mage, they'll it's usually like, pardon my French, they'll say like fuck Secret Mage in chat and stuff like that. And I to a point I can like understand that if they're they're frustrated at the one deck that they're playing against, but it's not so much like things being echoed. I think it's just players' experience from what they're experiencing on ladder at that rank and stuff like that. Like you could ask like a legend top 100 and they'll say like, oh god, Dark Glare's a huge issue, which it is obviously, but it's not really piloted from Diamond 5 to like high legend or whatever. So my experience is that people will complain about the decks that are widely popular, very easy to play kind of stuff. Like they don't like our Paladin. I guess stuff that's stuck around for so long and keeps on getting support are the decks that people have the most issue with, and it could be like say odd Paladin, whatever's flavor of the month essentially. Demon Hunter was for a good while, and again I always thought Demon Hunter was like a poor man's Pirate Warrior for quite a while, or a poor man's Kingsbane or whatever. But for the chat here, I always say I hate Psychic Scream. I hate that card with passion. So maybe chat would agree with me with Psychic Scream. I don't know.
I would at least. I mean, I don't really have an issue with stuff like Odd Paladin like sticking around for forever. Like I'm totally okay with that. I'm okay with Odd Paladin being a deck for 3.5-4 years. I'm okay with Key Block being a deck for 4 years. Like I'm okay with those. I think my issue is when there are some pretty obvious power outliers, right? Like I'm okay with Odd Paladin being a deck as long as it's like one of the 10 good decks in the format.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I totally agree with you. Like you should have all those decks. Like Reno Priest should exist, Big Priest should exist, Secret Mage should exist. All these decks should exist. I have no problem with archetypes. I have problem with cards. I have problem with individual cards. That's it. Yeah. And if they change like an individual card, who cares if that archetype's there? It's just a lovely part of Wild, isn't it?
And they've gotten so much better at like they can touch those cards without destroying archetypes. They've shown that they can do it over and over and over again. So I don't understand their hesitation when like you can still play the deck from yesteryear that you want to play and keep that same spirit, but you can also lower the power level of the deck so that it's not 30% of the metagame, So
I suppose if you replace Dean's quote where it says decks of yesteryear and then just replace that with cards, it would make more sense, I think. Like he doesn't want a player to come in and see their favorite card as being changed or mana increased. I don't know if that's where he's hinting at, or it's just like I don't know. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I don't know if that's where he means. Instead of decks, he just means because decks always exist, right? Like deck types always exist. Like you'll always have that style of Warlock, you'll always have that style of Mage. Like they're geared, their hero powers and their cards are geared towards like a play style. So I don't know if he means cards. Like people don't want to see their old cards changed. But yeah, the thing is, it's a set. It's like you don't own any of the cards that you buy in Hearthstone. You can't trade them. You can't sell them. You're basically paying for the experience of the game, and you want the experience of the game to be as fun as possible for the amount that you're putting into it and the time you're putting into it. So I think I don't want to say they don't owe anyone anything, right? Because we're basically playing a a multiplayer game, right? But we'd expect some kind of balance changes to make the game fun. I mean, that's all I could hope for, really. But if they want to go down the route of just like releasing sets and then the balance changes occur within those sets, or changes within the tier lists occur within those sets, then I'll still obviously play, but in the gaps where the game starts to get a bit stale, I'll probably play something else on stream until like a new expansion comes out.
Well, I would also mention referencing Magic the Gathering, right? A game that's been around for much longer than Hearthstone. They have eternal formats. I mean, we're not nearly at the point of Legacy or what Vintage or whatever the big. I'm gonna get corrected in the comments, but
Yeah.
they have formats like Modern. I believe is like what people usually equate to Hearthstone's Wild format. This is what I'm getting from people, and those formats get regular balance changes, right? And it's a lot harder to do balance changes in Magic, right? Because it's physical cards. You can't just adjust the mana cost of a card. But like they still make changes every year, right? They have a banned and restricted list. Like they make changes to their eternal formats and they hit cards. And what they do in Magic for the most part is like, since you're banning specific cards, you are ruining entire archetypes and decks. You don't have to do that in Hearthstone, right? You're just lowering the power level of cards and decks. And so I think you should be a lot more proactive, because if people in Magic the Gathering are doing this and they're just banning cards that have become problematic, I don't understand why we can't do that in Wild. So
yeah, that's always been Hearthstone's biggest advantage as a digital card game, is that they can just change the experience without having to physically go to everyone's house and, you know, like change the card or do something like that. So that's always been the biggest edge. And I feel like recently in Standard, they've been far more proactive in taking advantage of that edge. And I think eventually I do think they will start taking that more active approach in Wild. I don't think the current approach that they have will last forever. I think they're gonna eventually do things, but however long that takes, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't like the argument of like when someone says, "Well, it's a legacy." Of course, you know that's the way it works. I mean, it works like that because cards were physically printed, and it's very
they
hard.
can't do it. Yeah.
Can't do it. But we're in like an era now of card games where you don't own any of it, you don't buy any of it. It's just within their servers, whatever, on their client. I mean, on your client and on their servers. So there's a huge discrepancy in that argument now, where it can be easily changed, like and it's a live service. All you have to do is I don't know what the thing is. I suspect it's very hard for them to run hotfixes on Hearthstone. I don't know why. Whatever on their back end, they seem to be very reluctant. When they do a change, they like to roll all the changes out in one big go. So I think they have something technical in their back end. They can't just throw out a quick hotfix for one card. I think they have to wait, accumulate all these kind of like hotfixes and all. I think they accumulate all the bugs and stuff like that, and then they do it after like 1 month or whatever. So I don't know if that's part of the reluctancy to make a change of some cards, because if they do make a change, it might be like another month that they might need to revert something back. I don't know. That's just like kind of speculation, but yeah, they seem to be a little bit reluctant to do that kind of thing. I mean, a game that gets brought up quite a bit is Runeterra, and they do put out quite a lot of balance changes. I know they're only currently in like a standard format because they haven't had enough sets released to actually create kind of like a Legacy of Wild kind of format. But again, like Hearthstone, they both make decent amount of changes to their formats. They do it. I think they do it every season cycle in Runeterra. They've just done one now for a card called Go Hard, which after like a couple of months, like I think it was a month or two of playing, that card was actually nerfed, and that's still in rotation at the minute. I mean, it would be nice for them to take a look at Wild a little bit more, but I don't know if it's like a technical aspect as well. Like, I don't know if they just can't update things like immediately. I don't know if they just collect updates and just do them all in one go.
I mean, that hasn't stopped them from doing standard balance changes, right? I know data collection for Wild probably takes 10 times longer than it does in standard, which might be part of the contributing factors, but I don't know. I think the big kind of takeaway though is we don't agree with XR, right? I don't think any of us do. And hopefully the mindset of the team changes. I know he's been getting flamed a lot on Twitter and Reddit, and so maybe he won't, like. But first of all, a lot of the comments and messages he's gotten, I'm like, come on. Like,
yeah, please don't flame the devs, guys. Like, please don't do that. Yeah, if you say it, just like ignore it or something. Just don't join in on that.
But yeah, I do think that I'm hoping that all of this commentary from the community might influence them to change their perspective about the format moving forward. And I think that's like.
Do you think they get affected by any of that though? Like,
I think I probably not. Like in terms of the flaming, like I don't think the flaming is productive. I think like letting them know what you think is.
Oh no, not the flaming.
Is that what you just mean, or you mean the feedback in general?
I think the feedback. Do you think they ever obviously like the flaming is like you get like I guess hormonal teenagers going off. I always imagine it's that. I mean, do you ever think they take the feedback on board though? I know with Sea-Witch
I think they do. I genuinely think they do. I think that there are probably a lot of like directives from above and behind the scenes stuff that I don't want to speculate too much that might limit what they can do, even if they hear feedback. But I think in general, they do listen to feedback, and they probably have a lot of like data in terms of like the play patterns of players, right? Like when something gets changed, how many players stop logging in? How many hours do people play? They can probably track a lot of that stuff as well. But actually like, hearing words and hearing arguments and getting into a dialogue, I think it has some influence, but ultimately they'll probably do whatever their numbers suggest. So, you know, I think it has a little bit at least.
Wasn't he another developer actually? I forget the guy's name. It was like a week before Dane made his comments there. I'm sure they said they were going to look into Wild later this year.
Alec Dawson, I believe.
Alec, yeah.
Alec, I think Alec might have mentioned it.
Well, he mentioned that they were putting things in place to keep an eye on Wild moving forward. I think that was like his
okay.
Oh yeah, that's how he framed it, which is interesting, right? Mm-hmm. Like it seems something that Dane also talked about is that on the team, there's actually a very split perspective on what to do with Wild. He mentioned that is that among the dev team, there's a different perspective. So like. It is interesting that even on the development team itself, there is a difference, and how that, like what Alec is alluding to, I'm really interested to see what exactly he's talking about or hearing about what exactly that means, because currently it's very vague, and it sort of almost contradicts some of what Ixar is talking about in some ways. So I don't know, maybe just like keep an ear out for any of that stuff moving forward.
Yeah, I don't know when we'll get news on that. I'm hoping. With the new Hearthstone year, whatever animal it ends up being, mythical creature it ends up being, that we're gonna get this like classic basics rotation rework something, and with that's gonna come a bunch of news about Wild, because we already know that there's not gonna be a Hall of Fame, right? And Hall of Fame was kind of standard cards being sent to Wild, but they said that's not gonna be a thing anymore. So I'm very curious to see like if that shift of the classic and basic cards also comes with a shift in Wild in some term or form or another. And don't forget that there's also the supposed new game mode that we were promised in like the third expansion of the year. I was informed of on Twitter. And that probably has something to do with the rotation, I would assume, because we are more than halfway through this set. But I don't know. I'm hoping though that like you guys said, I'm gonna keep playing Wild no matter what, right? What happens, because I'm still happy playing the format as it is. But I do hope that something changes for the better, because it does suck streaming a game and making content about a game, and people are like constantly commenting about like how sucky the format is, right? Or how sucky certain decks are or certain cards are, and I'm hoping that like you get to see that happen less if they make more frequent changes. So. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's I think it was a pretty productive discussion about the Wild format. So yeah, so let's go ahead and move on to our last segment of the episode. We're going to be talking about our decks of the week. So these are meta and off-meta decks that we've all been messing around with, that we think that you guys would enjoy playing, whether you're climbing to Legend, trying to hit high Legend, or just trying to mess around at the rank floor and have a little bit of fun. So Dane, you're our guest. Do you want to present your deck first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let me just get my. So I don't remember what I've made. I've got it in front of me. It's the So I was playing with the biscuit card. So this is Mozaki, because I was always trying to do like a Mozaki deck with Apprentice and massive amount of draw, kind of like an old freeze mage trying to kind of feel. Not much card generation in there. The only card generation I think in there is Magic Trick and Evocation, and they're purely so you can build up more charges on the Mozaki. So this one I was playing. Obviously, I think I'm like 4,000 legend at the minute, so I'm very high legend. The deck obviously is comboed as well against your normal matchups like Priest and Reno decks and Warlocks and stuff like that. Struggles with Secret Mage because it's just too much disruption. But the idea is basically throw up ice blocks, throw up fair game, draw massive amounts of cards, play your biscuits, play your incanters flows, and around like I've done an OTK on turn 5. That was my earliest, and you could do it from turn 5 onwards to like turn 7, 8 more realistic. But you just basically throw out the Apprentice, throw out the Mozaki, and then just start ticking off all these 0 mana cards essentially. It does pretty alright. The main source of damage are the arcane missiles and frostbolts, but you can generate stuff off the evocation if you get lucky, pretty much.
Yeah, this deck is really sick for sure. I played against it a couple times, and all of a sudden, like the opponent's done like ice lances to me for like 23 damage or something. If you play that, I'm like, holy crap. But yeah, there's something like this in standard, so I really like that you've taken this like wild version, and I think it's sick. I think it's a super fun list, making use of the new mana biscuit. So yeah, this is fun.
Throwback to the conversation we were just having, but this is like what Freeze Mage has kind of evolved into, right? Like this Spellslinger OTK deck with Mozaki. I mean, I really enjoy kind of playing OTK decks like this. I enjoy decks like this rather than Malagos Druid, in my opinion, like my personal preference. And so I'm excited that you've been having a little bit of success with this. I might mess around with it a little bit.
It's good laugh. You just have to avoid Secret Mage at all costs.
Yeah. That easy, huh?
Yeah.
All right, Corbett, what do you got for us this week?
Oh, I've also got another Mana Biscuit deck. This one's a little bit more traditional. It's this normal Quest Mage. So it's pretty much traditional normal Quest Mage, except we've cut the primordial glyphs for the Mana Biscuit. They kind of do a similar thing instead of like giving you Mana Cyclone Fuel and kind of like banking mana for future turns. The difference is Mana Biscuit. I think just getting mana is probably better than getting like a cheaper spell. And you kind of want to keep the spell count a little low because of double Book of Spectres. But yeah, Quest Mage. I said earlier in the show, like I had one game where I completed the quest on turn 3. So if you manage to like get that nuts opener, you can't really do some truly disgusting, filthy things here. Mana Biscuit obviously great because it lets that like swing turn happen super early, but it also like gets you a proc on your quest. So yeah, it's been pretty fun to give it a shot. I don't think it's gonna be like top tier or anything, but it's definitely better than it was before the card came out.
So I have a really important question to ask you guys. So I live in the United States. I live in the southern United States. To me, a biscuit is a very sacred thing that you eat with like gravy, right? But in Australia, dude, like sausage gravy with biscuits, it's beautiful. But in Australia and England, like what is the art on Conjure Mana Biscuit? Is it a cookie or is it like an actual biscuit?
It's like a scone.
Yeah, it looks like scone. It looks like cake, doesn't it? It's like a fluffy white cake. But a biscuit in the UK is like a hobnob or a digestive biscuit. Do you like a little thing you dip in your tea or coffee?
I'd say biscuit is like a cookie basically, or something like that. Yeah.
So Conjure Mana Biscuit is like, it's the European it's the European biscuit, not like an American biscuit, is what you're telling me.
No. This is the American one. The art looks like an American biscuit, I think.
The art looks like somebody just took a bite out of something, so I can't really tell.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh, I have no idea. It looked like a cake. It looked like a scone or something like that. I don't know.
Well, that's very different. That's very different than my biscuit. So I think I'm gonna lean towards that. But regardless, I'm bittersweet about Quest Mage being better because I was hoping it was gonna be gone for forever. But back to the real things. But yeah, I mean, so. Obviously, I think it's probably got the same matchup spread that it did before, right? It probably sucks into Secret Mage, sucks into King's Mage, sucks into Odd Palette, probably sucks into a lot of decks that are aggressive. Do you think it's fast enough to beat up on Big Priest? I think is the big question because Shadow Essence is coming down on turn 5 and 6. Do you think you can beat that?
Yeah, I think you can beat that. I think you're fast enough. I think it probably speeds the deck up by like a turn. So yeah, I'd say so. No, I'm sure you love that Quest Mage is coming back me up. Your favorite deck of all time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Love losing to random cards.
Yeah.
And then the last deck that I want to talk about, I've been playing some Spell Token Druid. A lot of Spell Slinger decks this week. Basically, this deck is taking advantage of Arbor Up as basically a Savage War effect while also being a kind of board development tool. I've been having a lot of fun. I've been playing this deck on and off since the beginning of Darkmoon Fair with Solar Eclipse. This is an archetype that I really, really want to be powerful because it's a really cool archetype. It's one of those, like, I have the ability to make 6 boards, and if you can't clear all 6 of the boards, I'm going to kill you style of thing, which is kind of cool. I'm doing a little bit of experimenting because of the Arbor Up. I'm not running Power of the Wilds anymore because Power of the Wilds were like one of the weakest cards in that list. And so I'm messing around with like Nature Studies. The one thing that I've learned from playing this deck is like Bees is like an extremely cool, well-designed card. I absolutely love Bees in combination with like Solar Eclipse and all that kind of stuff. But this deck is a ton of fun to play. It's pretty competitive. The worst matchups are Secret Mage, right? Like most decks have poor matchups just because Flak Mage and Flame Ward suck to play against. But you're actually pretty good into Priest. Like even though they have a bunch of board clears, they only have so many. And like you said, the moment you stick a board, you Solar Eclipse, Savage Roar, and kill them for 50-60 damage, which is pretty cool. So, but yeah, this is Spell Druid. Arbor Up, very, very good card in this list. I don't think it's a great card in Wild outside it, like in general, but it's a very powerful tool for this list.
It's like the standard list that was like 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They were running Whispering Woods and stuff like pretty similar to that kind of like play style.
Yeah, they used to play like Giggling Inventor and stuff like that sometimes. So yeah, but it's going for the full spell version. I like this archetype a lot. I used to be a big fan of that standard version when it was around. So I like this deck. I hope it gets good. Like you said, the Flak Mage kind of bodies you pretty hard, which sucks. But apart from that, it's usually pretty okay into most things.
Yeah, I think Solar Eclipse in combination with like Lightning Bloom. Like, I have had turns where I have spent like 12 or 13 mana on turn 4, turn 5, which is kind of disgusting. It's a lot of fun to play though. I have the soft spot for like the decks that are like good enough to take games off the top tier decks, but aren't like super meta. And this kind of fills that role for me beautifully. I love them, and I've been having a ton of fun playing this deck. But yeah. That's going to wrap it up for us tonight, though. Again, we'll be doing State of the Wild episodes every Sunday, so if you guys enjoy these episodes, make sure you guys drop a subscription so that you get notified when we go live. And just a reminder that we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all your podcast distributors, so if you would like to listen on the go, make sure you guys check us out there. Dane, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. I'm sure people know who you are, but just in case they don't, let the people know where they can find you.
Oh, I forget my links now. I think I'm called Dane Half on Twitch. I'm pretty sure I am, yeah. And the YouTube channel is Dane, I think. If you search Hearthstone and Dane, it'll show up. Yeah, just do that. Thank you very much, though.
We really appreciate
Dane. Yeah, it was great having you on. A pretty like serious conversational topic, but it was actually really, really cool to get your perspective on stuff and talk about all that kind of thing as well. So
thank you for having me on as well. I don't usually get asked to do these things.
And Corbett, thank you again for joining me this episode. Let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, guys, you can find me at CorbettGames on Twitch and Twitter and all that good stuff. So yeah, come hang out. Enjoy the expansion. And yeah, thank you guys very much for listening. And hope you guys are all liking the expansion as well.
Yeah, we appreciate all of you guys for watching. We hope you guys are staying safe. We hope you all are enjoying the mini set. And until next time, sorry, I had to get it in one time.
Yikes, dude.
We will see you guys later.